The year was 1944. The bitter winter wind howled through the desolate forest of Iron Ridge, a strategic point deep in enemy territory. Captain James Holloway of the U.S. Army's 22nd Infantry Division had been tasked with holding the ridge against an overwhelming enemy force. For days, his men had dug trenches in the frozen ground, their fingers numb, their bodies aching, but their spirits unbroken. The battle had raged for weeks. Holloway's unit, numbering barely 200 soldiers, was vastly outnumbered. They had received reports that enemy reinforcements were closing in, their numbers possibly 3 times larger. If Iron Ridge fell, the enemy would gain a crucial foothold, threatening the main Allied supply lines. Surrender was not an option. As dawn broke, the first artillery shells screamed across the sky, exploding into showers of fire and dirt. The enemy was launching their final assault. Holloway gritted his teeth and stood atop the trenches, his rifle clutched tightly in his frostbitten hands. "Hold the line," he roared, his voice barely audible over the deafening artillery barrage. Sergeant Michael Carter, Holloway's most trusted officer, crouched beside him, scanning the horizon with a pair of battered binoculars. "They're coming in waves, sir," he muttered. "Looks like they're throwing everything they have at us." "Then we give them hell," Holloway replied, slamming a fresh magazine into his rifle. The first enemy troops charged through the trees, rifles blazing. The Americans opened fire, bullets ripping through the advancing soldiers. The air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire, the sharp crack of rifles blending with the thunderous booms of grenades. Men fell on both sides, their cries lost in the chaos. Private Sam Reynolds, a farm boy from Kansas, huddled behind a makeshift barricade, his heart hammering. He had never seen such carnage before. Bullets whizzed past his head as he fumbled to reload his weapon. "Come on, Sam," he whispered to himself. "Keep it together." The enemy pressed forward, their numbers seemingly endless. The Americans fought fiercely, their determination unwavering. Holloway moved from position to position, shouting orders, encouraging his men. He knew they couldn't hold out forever, but every minute they delayed the enemy gave the Allied reinforcements a chance to arrive. Hours passed, and still the battle raged. The snow, once pristine, was now stained with blood. Smoke and fire choked the air, and the scent of gunpowder burned Holloway's nostrils. His men were exhausted, their ammunition running low. He knew they were on the brink of collapse. Suddenly, a radio transmission crackled through the static. "This is Eagle Squadron. Reinforcements inbound. Hold your position." Relief washed over Holloway, but there was no time to celebrate. The enemy was preparing for one final push. He turned to his men, their faces smeared with dirt and blood. "This is it. We hold this ridge, or we die trying." A deafening war cry erupted as the enemy surged forward. Holloway fired his rifle until it clicked empty, then drew his sidearm. Beside him, Carter wielded a machine gun, cutting down foes with ruthless efficiency. Grenades exploded all around them, the force knocking men off their feet. The fighting became hand-to-hand, knives flashing, fists swinging. Reynolds, despite his fear, fought with everything he had. He saw his comrades fall one by one, but he refused to back down. He had promised himself he would see his mother again, and he intended to keep that promise. Then, just as hope began to wane, the distant roar of aircraft engines filled the sky. Dozens of Allied planes swooped down, strafing the enemy lines. Moments later, the ground rumbled as American tanks and fresh troops stormed onto the battlefield. The tide had turned. The enemy, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. Holloway, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, let out a weary sigh. They had done it. Against all odds, they had held Iron Ridge. As medics tended to the wounded, Holloway knelt beside Carter, who had taken a bullet to the leg. "We made it, Mike," he said, gripping his friend's shoulder. Carter gave a weak chuckle. "Told you we'd give them hell." The battle was over, but the war was not. Holloway knew they had won a crucial victory, but he also knew there were many more battles ahead. As he looked over the battlefield, at the fallen and the survivors, he silently vowed to honor their sacrifice. Iron Ridge would be remembered, not just as a place of death, but as a symbol of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of the American soldier.